Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In the United States, Democratic candidate Joe Biden has taken the lead in Georgia with nearly 99% of the votes counted. If Biden takes Georgia, President Donald Trump cannot achieve the required 270 electoral college votes to win the presidency. Biden has a razor-thin lead in Nevada and Arizona and is chipping away at Trump's advantage in Pennsylvania. However, Trump has once again complained of electoral fraud without offering evidence. In occupied Kashmir, Indian forces have martyred 3 people during a military raid in the Pulwama district. This comes as Kashmiris across the world are observing the Jammu Martyrs' Day to hail the sacrifices of Muslims in the November 1947 massacre. The Taliban have criticized the supply of foreign weapons to Afghan forces amid a recent spike in violence. In a tweet, the group said the move will undermine the ongoing peace efforts in the country. Earlier, Afghan forces received a heavy consignment of weapons, including 429 military vehicles from the United States. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In the United States, Democratic candidate Joe Biden has taken the lead in Georgia with nearly 99% of the votes counted. If Biden takes Georgia, President Donald Trump cannot achieve the required 270 electoral college votes to win the presidency. However, Trump has once again complained of electoral fraud without offering evidence. More in this report.
Vote counting continues in the key states of Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, and North Carolina, where a winner is yet to emerge. Though Joe Biden has a razor-thin lead in Nevada and Arizona, President Donald Trump is in no mood to concede to his rival. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump cast doubt on the democratic process by once again making unsubstantiated claims of electoral fraud.
We think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land. We'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this.
His Democratic rival Joe Biden has appealed for calm and again expressed confidence he would be declared the winner. The overall turnout is projected to be the highest in 120 years at 66.9% due to a surge in mail voting, and the final result could take days to come.
In occupied Kashmir, Indian forces have martyred 3 more youths during a military raid in Pulwama district. This comes as Kashmiris across the world are observing the Jammu Martyrs' Day to hail the sacrifices of Muslims in November 1947 massacre.
Hundreds of thousands of Kashmiris were massacred by the forces of Maharaja Hari Singh and Hindu extremists in Jammu while they were migrating to Pakistan in the first week of November 1947. Hundreds of Muslim women were raped and molested. Hundreds of Muslim women were raped and molested. The all-parties Hurriyat conference termed the tragedy as the worst kind of genocide in human history. Hurriyat leaders say the fascist Indian government wants to repeat the same sad story in occupied Kashmir. They also organized a prayer meeting to mark the day while renewing the pledge to thwart the Indian oppression. Azad Kashmir's President Sardar Masood Khan says the murderous campaign of Hindu extremists against Muslims hasn't stopped yet.
We mark November the 6th, 1947 as the darkest day in the history of Jammu and Kashmir. On that day, and in the months of October and November 1947, the Dogra Army, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and the Indian National Army massacred 237,000 Muslims. This was the first genocide after the Second World War on such a massive scale. From November the 4th to November the 6th, Muslim population of Jammu, Kathua, Udhampur and Riyasi were viciously targeted and attacked. Tens of thousands of people were duped into believing that they were being transported to Pakistan, but near Samba, at the Jammu-Sialkot road, they were all butchered mercilessly.
The region has been under a strict curfew since India revoked its autonomy in August last year. 23 people have been martyred by the occupation forces in October alone.
The Taliban have criticized the supply of foreign weapons to Afghan forces amid a recent spike in violence. Earlier, Afghan forces received a heavy consignment of weapons, including 429 military vehicles from the United States. In a tweet, the group spokesperson said the move will undermine the ongoing peace efforts in the country. The spokesperson questioned if the war in Afghanistan is an internal one after such foreign intervention. Meanwhile, NATO's Afghanistan chief General Scott Miller met with Herat governor and the military leadership. A spokesperson for the US forces said Miller assured Afghan forces of complete support by NATO. Azerbaijan says the Armenian Air Force has once again targeted civilian areas as the fighting over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region rages. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said its military dealt heavy damage to Armenian troops in response. Earlier, President Ilham Aliyev said his troops advanced to the positions just below the city of Shushi. The city is considered as a strategic fortress and a key to get control over the disputed region. Over 1,000 troops have been killed since the clashes broke out in September. Turkey has criticized Israel's move to demolish more than 70 Palestinian homes in the occupied Jordan Valley. In a statement, the foreign ministry said Israel's unlawful and inhumane acts are jeopardizing chances for peace.
As the world keenly watches the presidential election in the United States, its all-weather friend continues to build its hegemony in the occupied West Bank. Turkey's foreign ministry says Israel has demolished 690 structures across the West Bank so far this year. This has led to the displacement of some 850 Palestinians in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Last month, Israel approved the construction of more than 2,000 settler homes in the West Bank. In a bid to double down on its plans, Israel stopped issuing visas to United Nations human rights workers in Palestine. Israeli settlements are deemed as illegal under the international law. The international community and the United Nations have repeatedly called on Israel to put an end to its expansionist policies.
In Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vows to continue a military offensive in the northern state of Tigray amid concerns it could descend into civil conflict. In a televised address, Abiy said the offensive follows a deadly attack on a military camp. Tensions between the state and the federal government have risen in recent months. The Tigrayan president said his region is in a state of war. The state's governing party was once at the center of power in Ethiopia, but since Abiy became prime minister in 2018, it has been increasingly marginalized. The US has reported a record COVID-19 daily cases of over 118,000 for the second consecutive day, pushing the tally past 9.6 million. Globally, the number of deaths has exceeded 1.2 million with over 48.6 million cases. More in this report.
With over 10 months into the COVID-19, hopes for the pandemic ending anytime soon are becoming dimmer. 17 of the United States have reported record one-day increases in new infections. In addition to the rising coronavirus cases, hospitalizations of COVID-19 patients rose for the 11th consecutive day to over 52,000. About the economic situation in the country, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell believes it will need further stimulus to survive.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have taken forceful actions to provide relief and stability, to ensure that the recovery will be as strong as possible, and to limit lasting damage to the economy. Today, my colleagues on the Federal Open Market Committee and I reaffirmed our commitment to support the economy in this challenging time.
The second wave of the outbreak continues to batter Europe. Greece has reported record-high daily cases and deaths, while Denmark is set to impose tougher lockdown measures after discovering a mutated coronavirus strand in the country's northern parts. In Spain, the healthcare system is acutely strained as it becomes the fourth European country to surpass the 38,000 death toll. Matters in Belgium and Poland are no different, with hospitals set to run out of ICU beds really soon as cases spike.
It's not that the hospital do not want to take patients. They have nowhere to put them. They do not have beds at ward. A patient suspected of having been infected could be isolated from those who have not been infected.
Over in Asia, India has registered 670 deaths overnight, increasing the tally to nearly 125,000, with more than 8.4 million cases. Meanwhile, China has barred entry of non-Chinese travelers from Britain, France, Belgium, the Philippines, and India.
Pakistan has reported 30 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 1,376 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said the death toll in Pakistan has reached nearly 7,000. It said the number of active cases in the country is over 16,000. More than 317,000 patients have recovered so far across the country. It said 830 patients remain critical. Hong Kong's chief executive, Carrie Lam, has held meetings with the central governmental officials to discuss anti-coronavirus efforts. Lam is on a 3-day trip to Beijing. She said the central government has welcomed her proposals regarding a coronavirus relief package. Lam said Beijing is also willing to sponsor the technological innovation in Hong Kong. There have been 107 deaths and over 5,300 infections in the city. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has been sworn in for a second term. Ardern and her cabinet took oaths of their offices during a ceremony at Wellington's Government House. Ardern won 50% of the vote in October's general election, giving her 65 over 120 seats in the parliament. Her cabinet includes 8 women. Ardern says her government will prioritize fighting against COVID-19 and rebuilding the economy. Meanwhile, New Zealanders have voted in referendums on recreational marijuana use and euthanasia. Final results from the Electoral Commission showed a slim 50.7% majority voted against cannabis use, whereas nearly 2/3 backed allowing euthanasia. Kosovo's former president Hashim Taji has been arrested over charges of war crimes in the 1990s War of Independence. He has been transferred to the detention facilities of a special tribunal in The Hague. Taji and his allies are accused of committing nearly 100 murders and other atrocities against various ethnicities. He resigned on Thursday after learning the tribunal had confirmed a war crimes indictment against him. The Hague-based court is governed by Kosovo law but is staffed by international judges and prosecutors. In Libya, at least 14 unidentified dead bodies have been unearthed in mass graves discovered in Tarhuna city near capital Tripoli. Authorities say 112 bodies have been unearthed from mass graves since June. Libya's internationally recognized government and Eastern forces have repeatedly accused each other of committing mass killings. The two sides had been engaged in a deadly armed conflict for more than a year in and around Tripoli. Welcome back. In Central America, more than 70 people have died as Hurricane Atta unleashed torrential rains and catastrophic flooding in the region. Authorities say the storm has forced tens of thousands of people to leave their homes for shelters, while hundreds are stranded on rooftops or cut off by the floods. The storm hit Nicaragua as a mighty Category 4 hurricane on Tuesday. Atta has since been downgraded to a tropical storm. It is expected to head towards Cuba and possibly the Gulf of Mexico by early next week. The United Nations and the World Health Organization have called for an emergency action to avert major measles and polio epidemics. The two organizations say COVID-19 has further exacerbated the vaccination coverage gaps. A joint statement said millions of vulnerable children are at a heightened risk of preventable diseases. It warned a failure to eradicate polio will lead to the global resurgence of the disease. The statement said as many as 200,000 new cases will emerge annually within 10 years. Approximately $655 million are needed to address the dangerous immunity gaps. In South Korea, two activists are trying to combat a tide of plastic that the pandemic has unleashed. Green activists melt down old bottle caps to make tube squeezing device they believe consumers will find useful. What in this report?
The environmentalists opened their plastic mill in downtown Seoul in July, attracting 2,000 volunteers they called Sparrows. The Sparrows collected an estimated 85,000 bottle caps in their first drive. These volunteers get their name from an old Korean proverb, "A sparrow cannot pass by a mill without stopping." The Sparrows get one upcycled tube squeezer as a reward, no matter how many bottle caps they bring in.
We don't praise them or give benefits for sending lots of plastic waste. The most important thing is reducing plastics and then reuse them. Third thing to do is upcycling. We are not saying the plastic mill is solution for plastic waste problem.
The coronavirus has led to a surge of takeaway food and drink in South Korea. This has caused a 14.6% increase in plastic production in the first 8 months of the year.
I have been in this business more than 40 years, but I have never seen as many plastics as these. Due to COVID-19, there has been an increase of about 20% in plastic waste. Many of them are single-use plastics, and oil prices also dropped, which caused a huge deficit.
The recycling rate for collected waste in South Korea fell to 40.6% in 2019, compared with 57.9% in 2015. The activists say they are also testing the viability of upcycling the plastic waste into other products, such as frisbees, plates, and small furniture, as they believe two of them and the Sparrows are not the answer.
An Australian artist turned grain silos into his canvas while he painted a diviner-inspired mural on it. A larger-than-life mural has brought an artistic flourish to the once barren landscape. What in this report?
In some parts of Australia, proponents believe they can find water underground by using rods. So when Finton McGee was asked to paint a trio of silos in a small rural town of Baraba, he decided against the archetypical image of sheep and cattle and drew a water divner. During a research trip to the town, the artist saw a divner working with bore drillers amid the persistent dry conditions.
There's kind of an ongoing drought in New England, in that region, at that time anyway. And I thought that the bore drilling was kind of something interesting and kind of related to the drought. And, you know, a lot of my work deals with climate change and the environment. So that was something I thought could be quite interesting.
The large size has one great advantage over other forms of street art. It is almost impossible for passerbyers not to look. A common observation by onlookers is the man in the painting resembles Prince Harry.
Probably make a postcard and send it to the Poms and say, hey, Harry's been to Australia, took his picture and put him on a silo. Yeah, so there you go. First thing.
The investors worried. The pan-European stocks 600 fluctuated either side of the flat line. London's FTSE is hovering around the flat line, while Frankfurt's DAX has shed marginally. Paris's CAC 40 has edged down. The FTSE MIB in Italy has also dropped fractionally. Earlier, most Asian markets traded mixed, with all the bourses edging up slightly, with the exception of the mainland Chinese shares. Japanese auto giant Toyota Motor has doubled its full-year operating prediction amid a rebound in sales in China. The company said it expects a profit of $12.6 billion for the year through March 2021. This will be a significant jump from the previous year's $4.77 billion profit. Toyota said online sales and other initiatives helped the company to continue building relationships with its clientele. The auto giant said its sales recovery in COVID-19 crisis outpaced the market by more than 3%. Toyota reported a 24% operating loss in profit in the current year due to the pandemic. And now the weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.